Something is happening in Cleveland, and they're not even trying to hide it anymore. The Cleveland Browns haven't officially named a starting quarterback. No press conference announcement, no dramatic headline, no QB1 speech. But if you've been paying attention, the decision might already be made. Because in the NFL, teams don't always tell you what they're doing. They show you. And right now, everything, from reps to presence to coaching behavior, is pointing in one direction. Shedeur Sanders. While other quarterbacks have been in and out, reports claim Shedeur has been in the building consistently, every day, working, learning, building relationships. And that might sound small, but in the NFL, that matters more than people realize. Because this isn't just about talent. It's about trust. And trust is built behind the scenes long before it ever shows up on game day. At the same time, there's been a noticeable shift in how the coaching staff is moving. Todd Monken isn't being vague. He's not dodging questions. He's not spreading reps evenly just to keep things quiet. Instead, reports suggest one thing clearly: Shedeur is getting the most opportunities. And in football, that's everything. Because reps aren't random. Reps are earned, and more importantly, they're invested. Coaches don't give valuable reps to players they're unsure about. They give them to players they're preparing to start. Now here, where it gets even more interesting. This isn't just about one player rising. It's about others quietly fading out of the picture. Veterans still exist in the room. Other names are still technically in the conversation. But when you look closely, the gap is growing, and it's growing fast. And that's why this situation feels different. Because this doesn't feel like a quarterback competition anymore. It feels like a transition, a shift, a moment where a franchise is slowly, but clearly, handing the keys to someone new. And if that's true, then what we're watching right now isn't just off-season noise. It's the beginning of something much bigger. Here's the part nobody is talking about loud enough, but everyone inside the building can feel it. Shedeur Sanders isn't just competing for a job. He's taking over the room. And it's not happening through headlines, highlight throws, or viral moments. It's happening in the most important place possible, the building. Day after day, while other quarterbacks are coming in and out, reports suggest Shedeur has been there consistently, showing up, putting in work, being present. That might not sound flashy, but in the NFL, that's how trust starts. Because teammates notice everything. They see who's in early. They see who's staying late. They see who's locked in when nobody's watching. And over time, those small details turn into something bigger: belief. And belief is everything in a locker room. Now compare that to what's happening around him. There's been talk, nothing officially confirmed, but reports suggest that other quarterbacks haven't had that same level of presence. Whether it's timing, schedule, or just off-season approach, the contrast is there. And in a competitive QB room, contrast matters. Because when one guy is consistently showing up, and others aren't matching that energy, it creates separation without a single snap being played. That's how leaders emerge. Not by being announced, but by being undeniable. And here, where it gets even more interesting. This isn't just about effort, it's about awareness. Shedeur seems to understand exactly where he is right now. A young quarterback, a huge opportunity, a franchise watching closely, and instead of waiting for things to happen, he's attacking it early. That sends a message, not just to coaches, but to teammates. It tells them, I'm serious about this. And when players start to feel that from a quarterback, everything changes. The offense listens more, the locker room leans in, the energy shifts. Because quarterbacks aren't just judged by talent. They're judged by presence. And right now, Shedeur has it. But here, the key part. This isn't being forced. No big speeches, no media push, no look at me moments. It's quiet. It's consistent. And that's why it's powerful. Because when leadership grows naturally inside a locker room, it sticks. And if this continues, it won't matter what the depth chart says on paper. Because eventually, the team will make the decision for them. And once that happens, everything else falls into place. At first glance, it looked like nothing. Just a jersey number. But if you really understand football, and more importantly, how players think, you know this was never just about a number. When Shedeur Sanders got his number 2 back in Cleveland, something shifted instantly. Not publicly, not with headlines, but internally, everything clicked. Because number 2 isn't random for him. That's identity. That's the version of Shedeur that people watched in college, the one at Colorado, the one making plays, commanding attention, carrying confidence like it was part of his uniform. That number is tied to his rhythm, his swagger, his mindset. It's where he plays free. And when he first arrived in the NFL wearing a different number, it just didn't feel right. Not wrong, but not him. Like wearing something that fits, but doesn't belong to you. And that matters more than people realize. Because quarterbacks operate on confidence, timing, feel. The smallest mental edge can change how they move, how they throw, how they lead. And when something feels off, even slightly, it shows up on the field. Now fast forward. The Cleveland Browns give him number 2 back. And suddenly, it's like a reset button got hit. This isn't just a cosmetic change. This is the organization sending a message without saying a word. They're not trying to reshape him. They're not trying to control his identity. They're embracing it. They're saying, be that guy. And when a team does that for a young quarterback, it builds confidence fast. Because now it's not just belief from within, it's belief from the outside. And that combination, that's powerful. But here, where it gets even deeper. This move didn't happen in isolation. It lines up perfectly with everything else we're seeing: more reps, more presence, more trust from the coaching staff. It all connects. The number change isn't the reason he's rising. It's confirmation that the rise is already happening. And players notice that. Teammates see who gets that kind of backing. They understand what it means when a franchise leans into a player's identity instead of trying to change it. That's how leadership grows naturally. That's how a quarterback becomes the quarterback. So yeah, on the surface, it's just a jersey switch. But underneath, it's a signal. A quiet but very clear message that things are moving in one direction. And if you're paying attention, this was one of the loudest signs yet. And then the coach made it obvious. Not with a bold announcement, not with some headline-grabbing quote, but if you understand how the NFL works, what Todd Monken just did said everything. Because this wasn't subtle at all. When reports started coming out that Shedeur Sanders is getting the most reps this offseason, that wasn't just a random detail. That was, let's see what happens. That was a signal. A loud one. Because in football, reps are currency. And coaches don't spend that currency on players they're unsure about. They invest it. They give reps to the guy they're preparing, the guy they're building timing with, the guy they want the offense to revolve around. And whether people want to accept it or not, that's exactly what this looks like. Now here's what makes this even more interesting. Monken isn't playing the usual game. You've seen it before, coaches dodging questions, saying things like, it's an open competition or we'll evaluate over time, keeping everything vague to avoid pressure or controversy. That's not happening here. There's been no real attempt to hide what's going on. No equal distribution of reps just to make it look fair. No effort to keep the narrative balanced. And when a coach stops doing that, it usually means the decision is already leaning one way. Now, to be clear, nothing is officially confirmed. But when actions start lining up this cleanly, you don't need an announcement. You can read it. And right now, everything Munkin is doing points in the same direction. He sees something. Whether it's leadership, preparation, decision-making, whatever it is, reports suggest he's already comfortable giving Shedeur the edge, and that matters more than anything else. Because once a coach believes in a quarterback, that's it. There's no going back to even competition. There's no resetting the room. Everything starts building around that belief. And here's the part people don't talk about enough. This kind of shift doesn't just affect the quarterback room. It affects the entire team. Receivers start getting used to one timing. The offensive line adjusts to one style. The locker room starts recognizing one voice as the leader. And once that process begins, it's hard to reverse. So while fans are still debating who might start, the Browns might already be moving like they know. And if that's true, then this isn't a competition anymore. It's a transition that's already in motion. Now here, where things get a little uncomfortable. Because while all the attention is shifting toward Shedeur Sanders, there's still one name in the room that nobody can just ignore. Deshaun Watson. And to be clear, this isn't about disrespect. This isn't about rewriting what he's done in the past. But when you look at what's happening right now, something feels different. Something has changed. Reports suggest Watson has been around, has had conversations, has stayed connected, but not at the same level of presence as Shedeur. And again, that might not seem like a big deal on the surface. But in a quarterback battle, or whatever this situation is turning into, those details matter. Because while one player is consistently in the building, building relationships, stacking reps, and gaining trust, the other feels a little more distant from the day-to-day momentum. And in the NFL, momentum is everything. Now, to be fair, there are always layers to situations like this. Off-season schedules vary, timing isn't always equal, and nothing here officially says Watson is out of the picture. But at the same time, the direction feels like it's shifting. Quietly. Because when you look at how the Cleveland Browns are moving, it doesn't feel like they're building around Watson anymore. It feels like they're preparing for something else. And that's where things get interesting. Because this isn't the kind of decision teams announce early. This is the kind of transition that happens gradually. Less talk, more action, less statements, more signals. And right now, those signals are hard to ignore. You've got a younger quarterback gaining traction, gaining reps, gaining support, and at the same time, the veteran presence, while still there, doesn't seem to be driving the direction anymore. It's subtle, but it's real. And situations like this can turn fast. Because once a team starts leaning one way, it's hard to stop that momentum. The locker room adjusts. The coaching staff adjusts. The entire structure starts shifting around that new direction. That doesn't mean Watson is completely out of it. But it does mean something important. This is no longer his team by default. And that's a big change. Because in the NFL, once that shift happens, even quietly, it usually doesn't go backwards. It only moves forward. And right now, all signs are pointing in one direction. Here, where things start getting really interesting and a little uncomfortable. Because if you look closely at what's happening inside the Cleveland Browns quarterback room, it doesn't feel like a competition anymore. It feels like a split. Not an official one, not something anyone is saying out loud, but it's there. And once you see it, you can't ignore it. On one side, you've got Shedeur Sanders, present, consistent, building momentum every single day, showing up, getting reps, forming connections with coaches and teammates. On the other side, things feel a little more uncertain. Take Dillon Gabriel, for example. Now, to be fair, reports suggest there's nothing wrong with his situation. Off-season attendance can vary, Timing can be different for every player, and none of this officially means anything negative. But at the same time, the contrast is hard to ignore. Because while Shedeur is consistently in the building, Gabriel hasn't been around in the same way. And in a normal situation, that might not matter. But this isn't a normal situation. This is a quarterback room where every detail is being watched. Every rep, every interaction, every presence or absence. And when one player is constantly visible and another is, it naturally creates separation. Not because someone said it should, but because it just happens. And here, where it gets even more telling. There hasn't been much noise around Gabriel's role moving forward. No strong statements, no clear plan being discussed publicly, just silence. And in the NFL, silence is loud. Because when a team believes in a player, you usually hear something, even subtle hints, even cautious optimism. But when that noise isn't there, it makes you wonder. Now again, nothing is confirmed. This isn't about declaring anything official. But when you combine everything, the reps, the presence, the lack of clarity, it starts to paint a picture. And that picture looks less like a wide-open competition, and more like a direction that's already being chosen. Because quarterback battles aren't just decided on the field. They're shaped long before that. Inside meetings, inside workouts, inside the building. And right now, all those small details are lining up in a way that's hard to overlook. Which means this divide, it might not stay quiet for much longer. Here's the part that changes everything, and it's not coming from coaches. It's coming from inside the locker room. Because while fans are still debating, while media is still trying to frame this as a competition, there's a growing feeling, based on reports and what's being said, that the team might have already made up its mind. And that team, they're leaning toward Shedeur Sanders. Now let's be clear, this isn't something officially announced. Nobody is standing at a podium saying, "He's our guy." But in football, you don't always need words. You can feel it. Because players know. They know who moves the offense. They know who commands the huddle. They know who gives them the best chance to win, even before it shows up in games. And according to reports and growing buzz around the team, there's been real belief building around Shedeur behind the scenes. And that matters more than anything. Because once a locker room starts leaning toward a quarterback, it's hard to stop that momentum. You've even had strong voices, leaders in the building, publicly or subtly showing support, guys who don't speak unless it means something. And when players like that start backing a quarterback, it's not random. It's earned. But here, where it gets even more interesting. There's been speculation, again, nothing confirmed, that last season, this kind of player belief may not have fully aligned with the decisions being made. That what players were seeing on the field didn't always match how things were handled. And if that's true, that creates tension. Because nothing divides a locker room faster than feeling like the best option isn't being used. Now fast forward to today. You've got Todd Monken stepping in, talking about player belief and consensus. And that's not just coach talk. That's a shift. That's a coach recognizing that the locker room matters and that the players' voices carry weight in this decision. And if the reports are even halfway accurate, the locker room has already spoken. They believe in Shedeur. Not because of hype, not because of draft position, but because of what they've seen up close, his work, his leadership, his presence. And once that kind of belief takes hold, it changes everything. Because at that point, it's no longer just about who can start. It's about who the team is ready to follow. And right now, that answer is becoming harder and harder to ignore. But here's the part that really separates this situation from all the usual off-season hype. It's not the reps. It's not the jersey. It's not even the coach's words. It's the work. Because while everything else we've talked about can be debated, questioned, or even dismissed, this part is undeniable. Shedeur Sanders has been the one consistently in the building. And that changes everything. While other players are in off-season mode, traveling, relaxing, resetting, reports suggest Shedeur has been doing the opposite, showing up daily, watching film, working with coaches, breaking down every detail like the season never ended. And that's a different mindset. That's not, I'll get ready when it's time. That's, I'm already behind. And coaches notice that immediately. Because at the NFL level, talent is expected. Everyone is talented. Everyone was the best player somewhere, but what separates guys, especially at quarterback, is obsession. The small details. Footwork. Timing. Decision speed. Reading defenses before the snap, not after. The things casual fans don't always see, but coaches value more than anything. And when Todd Monken speaks on that, when he points out who's putting in the work, that's not random praise. That's intentional. Because coaches don't hand out compliments like that unless they mean something. When a coach publicly recognizes one player's preparation over everyone else's, that player is setting the standard. And that's exactly what this looks like. Shedeur isn't just competing. He's separating. Quietly. Consistently. Day after day. And here, why that matters so much. Because work ethic doesn't just improve your game. It builds trust. Coaches trust you more. Teammates believe in you more. The entire organization starts leaning your way because they see the effort behind the scenes, not just the results on the field. And once that trust is built, it's hard to lose. Now add that to everything else we've already seen, more reps, more presence, more support, and it starts to paint a very clear picture. This isn't hype. This isn't a media push. This is a player earning his position step by step. And that's the most dangerous type of rise. Because it's real. And if this pace continues, it won't just be about winning the job. It'll be about taking control of the entire franchise direction. And this is where the story flips completely. Because not too long ago, the conversation around Shedeur Sanders sounded very different. There were doubts. A lot of them. Critics questioned everything, his readiness, his ability to handle NFL pressure, whether his success would translate at the next level. Some said he was overhyped. Others claimed he benefited from his situation in college. And every time something didn't go perfectly, those voices got louder. Reports and commentary at the time suggested people were watching him under a microscope. Every throw analyzed. Every mistake amplified. Every performance turned into a debate. And in the NFL, that kind of noise can break players fast. Because when doubt starts creeping in, it doesn't just affect how people see you. It affects how you see yourself. But here, what makes this situation different? He didn't fold. He didn't start pointing fingers. He didn't disappear. He didn't let the pressure turn into panic. Instead, he stayed locked in, kept working, kept improving, even when the outside narrative wasn't in his favor. And that part doesn't always get talked about enough. Because development in the NFL isn't clean. It's messy. It's uncomfortable. Sometimes it looks like struggle before it looks like progress. And according to reports and observations, that's exactly what this phase was for him. Now fast forward to what we're seeing today. Everything is starting to align. The Cleveland Browns are giving him more reps. The coaching staff, especially Todd Monken, is showing public confidence. The locker room is building belief around him, and most importantly, He's backing it up with preparation and consistency. That's how narratives change. Not overnight, but piece by piece. And now what used to be doubt is turning into control. Because when a quarterback gains trust from coaches, respect from teammates, and confidence in himself all at the same time, that's when things shift. That's when it stops being about potential and starts becoming reality. Now, to be clear, nothing is officially locked in yet. But when you look at the full picture, it doesn't feel like a question anymore. It feels like a direction. A franchise slowly but clearly moving toward a new identity. And if this continues, then what we are watching right now isn't just a young quarterback improving. It's a player taking control of a team's future. And once that happens, there's no going back. And when you put everything together, it becomes really hard to ignore what's actually happening here. This doesn't feel like a quarterback competition anymore. It feels like a decision that's already been made, just not officially announced. Because look at the pattern. The Cleveland Browns are giving Shedeur Sanders the most reps. He's been the most consistent presence in the building. The coaching staff, especially Todd Monken, is openly backing his preparation, his mindset, and his growth. And maybe most importantly, the locker room believes in him. That's not one factor. That's every factor. And in the NFL, when all of those things line up at the same time, it usually means one thing: the direction is already set. Now, does that mean it's official? No. There's still time, there are still practices, there are still moments that could shift things, and as always, nothing is locked in until it's announced. But let's be honest, when a team starts moving like this, they're not guessing anymore. They're building. Because competitions are usually messy, unclear, balanced, coaches go out of their way to keep things even, to avoid showing their hand too early. That's not what this looks like. This looks organized, focused, intentional. And that's why this feels different. Because instead of asking, who's going to win the job, the real question now is, how far can this go? Because if everything we're seeing continues, if the work ethic stays consistent, if the leadership keeps growing, if the team keeps responding, then this isn't just about becoming the starter. This is about becoming the face of the franchise. And that's a completely different level. Now here's the part that should have the rest of the league paying attention. This rise isn't quiet. It's not hidden behind excuses or slow development timelines. It's happening right in front of everyone. Step by step, signal by signal. And if people are still treating this like it's undecided, they might already be late. Because what we're watching right now doesn't feel like a battle. It feels like the beginning of a takeover. And if that's true, then the rest of the NFL might want to start preparing now. Because this situation, it's moving a lot faster than people think.